Hey guys, Mr. Dave Rubin is now in a very, very, very select group. I think there's only one other person who's been on my show twice, but I won't remind him who's the person who's been by far the most on his show. Uh, I think on my show it's only you and Jordan Peterson who've now been repeat guests, so consider this a great accolade.
Wow, I love that this is all sort of happening. Our concentric circles keep colliding with each other. I do have to tell you, Gad, while it's nice to be in good company with Jordan Peterson, who will be on my show again in a couple weeks, that I believe now you as a four-time
Five.
I believe you're a five?
I'm a five. Count
Oh, you're a
them.
five, then you're all right. You're still okay
Hold
because I had Michael Shermer on last week, and that got him to four.
Okay, because just to be sure that we get our stats correct, when I came in February 2016, I did a one-on-one sit-down and a panel discussion with Lalo, and so I'm counting that one as another appearance, right? I mean, it is.
Gad, I love for someone with all of your accomplishments and published books and all of the influence that you have, that I feel that this is your biggest point
It's
of pride. I
flag
love
of
it.
greatness, yes, indeed. All right, listen. I tried to put out. Well, I put out a call on Twitter and on my Facebook page of topics that we should cover. I asked people, and I went through them actually. Contrary to my new edict, which is I don't read anything that anybody writes to me. In this case, I specifically solicited responses. Many of them were sort of the tradition, the usual stuff, Islam, this, that. And so I thought that I would only pick three or four that might be topical, but not necessarily some of the stuff we've talked about before. And then I wanted to ask some personal questions later, which I think might sort of open our respective, inner workings to the crowd. So let's take it away. Let's start with.
Can I just say
Please
one thing
go.
really quick before
Go.
we start? I like interrupting interviewers. That's my thing. Is that yesterday or the day before when you tweeted out that I was coming on, I retweeted you and I put the link to the original time I was on with you, which is over 2 years ago. It's almost 2.5 years ago, and I watched a few minutes of it, and forgetting the fact that I have a beard now. It really felt like a lifetime ago. So much has changed.
Right.
I think in how we think, how we all operate, the landscape of certainly of America and in some ways in Canada as well. So much has changed in just 2 years. And I think that perhaps is why people do come to people like us for some honesty, because they're really not getting it anywhere else. So that's the marker for this conversation. Let's start with some honesty and let's go.
Right. Well, and I would say, and I think another reason why maybe people appreciate our respective formats is that the long format, I think, allows people to come in with much greater intimacy into our conversation than would typically be afforded in a typical, snippet. Even the chat, which we'll talk about, what I call now Lobster Gate, the Cathy Newman and Jordan Peterson thing, which I satirized yesterday. Even something like that, I mean, just the way the studio looks and so on, it just doesn't look intimate. Whereas I think the conversations that you and I have, it's as if people are coming into our living room and participating in our conversation. I think people really respond well to that. Do you think so?
Oh, of course. I mean, and the truth is that, we didn't know each other, 4 years ago? Right. We had no idea who we were. When you first tweeted at me, I see Gad SAAD, I assumed that you were Muslim. And also our friend Lalo Dagash, his thing said Palestinian. I assumed he was Muslim. Now, obviously, not all Palestinians are Muslim. But it just goes to show that when you find people who have interesting ideas, all of your preconceived notions will crumble. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's why it's so cool that the 40 of us or whatever it is that are in this new thing that Eric Weinstein is referring to as the intellectual dark web, which I love that phrase. It's like people, they sense that we're at least trying. Right. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. But we will try. And I know that whatever we're going to do, for as long as we're going to talk right now, we won't censor ourselves. And I welcome you to ask me anything and push me on anything. And that's it.
All right. Well, let's start with guys. Do you regret having held that conversation? Or on the contrary, hey, it's all part of the repository of content and you're delighted that it happened? What's your view on that?
Well, let's start with this. So for the people that don't know, this is when I had Candace Owens on Red Pill Black, and she was debating Blair White. Now, I had become friendly with both of them. I still am friends with both of them. And this was all about whether Candace had this doxing website and whether it had released information. Blair was one of her chief critics, but certainly not the biggest chief critic. And to Blair's credit, by the way, within, I think, 30 seconds of texting her and asking her if she would have this debate, she immediately said yes. So regardless of what you think of the debate or who won or any of that stuff, the fact that these are people who will stake out positions and then defend them publicly is a beautiful thing. That is not the way most celebrities or public people operate. I mean, you could just look on Twitter, look at all the lefty comics that are supposed to be funny that pontificate all day long, that refuse to ever engage in an honest discussion. They just want to do it from the comfort of their computer.
I think one of them you're trying to get on your show. I think her name rhymes with Farrah.
Yeah, and it ain't Farrah Fawcett. Yeah, Sarah Silverman I would include in that, Chelsea Handler. Right. I mean, I've invited both of them. I think they have a terrible set of ideas, and I would treat them with the absolute respect that I treat all my guests with. But it's easy just to all day long be tweeting all this nonsense and lies and drivel and okay, fine. As for that debate and guys, I don't regret it because, first off, Save Dave trended on Twitter. That's pretty great. I mean, I've never trended on Twitter before. The memes that people came up with and the videos and that video of me, they do the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song at the end. I mean, that to me is probably the best video that a fan or an audience member has ever made of me. Look, was the content of what happened there for that hour and a half, was that my most proud moment? No, it was probably the worst actual hour of content we've ever put out there, but it showed something. It was real. It was raw. I think they both, and I can't speak for them, I think they both, if they could look back, would have done it a little bit differently. Candace, who I like very much, by jumping out at the beginning and saying the thing about I'm sitting across from a man, it just doesn't win you any points, even if biologically you're correct. And by the way, Blair doesn't even deny biology. But so yes, it got derailed. I don't regret it. I guess if anything, I could have got up in the middle. We have this great bar cart here, and I got plenty of booze on set. I should have just started drinking or something. But I don't regret it. It's just a moment in time. It's a rare aberration. And by the way, not only were the memes great, but the amount of emails that I got after saying, Dave, I love what you do, and you're always so tolerant and respectful, and blah, blah, blah. That wasn't your best moment, or some people saying that was truly your worst moment. They said, but everyone gets one. Everyone gets one, and that's what it is. Guess what? The greatest basketball players have horrible games. It's all right. Michael Jordan, I'm sure, scored 6 points once. And I'm not saying I'm Michael Jordan. I'm just saying that sometimes you lose control and you live and learn, and I did learn from that. And we're going to be hosting more of these debates. So I have Shapiro and Peterson on January 31st, which is pretty awesome. And I know that they don't have that much to log their heads at, but it's all a learning experience of how do you negotiate with 2 people, 4 people, all of that stuff. So I have no qualms about what happened, really.
Speaking about basketball players, when I was at your house for dinner last time with my family, I hope you don't mind me sharing this. I won't mention his name until you decide if you want to. You had said that the person that you would like to most invite is a basketball hero of yours, and that you were working on trying to get him on the show. And I had retorted that I'm trying to get the Stylistics lead singer to come on my show. Yeah. Where are you in that process? And if you want to share who he is, then feel free. If not, I understand.
No, I'm happy to share. But even before I do, the fact that, so you want this singer from a somewhat random band from what, the 70s, 80s?
Random band?
Yeah,
are you insane? The Stylistics, one of the founders of Philly Soul? Yeah, random. Other than being in the Hall of Fame, they're random. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, from when? From what was there like?
So 70s.
Okay, so
70s, when you were about 15, 20 years old in the 70s.
Right. Right. So my point is, you want this singer from this band that really affected you, the music, as you were telling me, that really speaks to you, and you don't necessarily know what this person thinks about politics or any of the things that you talk about, but you would just love to, this person did something, created some piece of art that affected you, and you'd love to talk to them. I love that. I love that idea. So for me, what you're relating this to is my favorite basketball player of all time, I've got a little figure of him right here, is Clyde Drexler. Now, he was not people always used to say he was sort of second to Michael Jordan, but he played in Portland and Houston, two small markets. He was never controversial, really, never out. He was actually the reverse. He was always very non-controversial intentionally, and he used to get crap for that. I don't know that he would talk about any of the things that we talk about here. I have literally no idea what his political beliefs are or any of that. But this is a guy who just influenced me somehow. Somehow watching this guy play, I started playing basketball like him to my much lesser degree. But there was something about the way he carried himself, that he was sort of decent and he wasn't a showboater, that I think I did incorporate into myself a little bit. And I think I told you this, but the one thing more than anything else is that Clyde had made it to the NBA Finals a couple of times, 1990 and 92, and lost to the Pistons and the Bulls. His 91 team lost to the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. So he had kept getting close, but never winning. He finally then was traded to Houston, his hometown, in 95, and he won the championship. And he was an old player at the time. He was 12 years in. People thought he was towards the end of his career. But what that built into me is that if you keep going and keep going and keep trying and fail, but keep going, that maybe you can win. And it worked for the guy that I idolized the most. And that, I think, really, again, it was something that was built into me, so that for all my ups and downs in stand-up and doing stuff with the Young Turks and Aura TV and going independent and all those hills and peaks and all of that, it was built into me that if I keep doing this, that I will succeed. And maybe I'm on some of the success part of it now. But the irony is I feel like I'm just at the beginning again. We have so much work to do and so many more things to talk about. So yes, Clyde and I have sent a couple texts back and forth, and it looks like it's going to happen.
Oh, good. By the way, if you see me doing this once in a while, as you see me doing now or this, it's not that I'm losing interest in what you're saying. It's that I am very concerned that somehow the recording stops. And so I check the red light on the microphone and on the thing. It's just part of my anal perfectionist self.
I assume you're doing some sort of Minority Report thing over there, so it's all right.
All right. So we talked a few minutes ago about, one of your, I guess, quote, difficult chats with the two individuals in question. Let's segue to a difficult chat that happened not on your show, but that happened a day or two ago in England between a common friend of ours, Jordan Peterson, and a lady whom I did not know until I saw her on that particular show. Several people wanted to know what are your thoughts about what transpired.
Well, I mean, it was such a beautiful example of everything that we and Jordan and so many of us in this space that are talking about free speech. It was a beautiful example of why we are right on this front and why our opposition is really wrong. I mean, I'm sure most of the audience that's watching this right now has seen this already. But in effect, the question was, why does your right to free speech, Jordan Peterson, supersede a trans person's right to be offended? Now, I know Jordan well. Again, he's been in my home. We've had dinner. We've traveled together and done events. This man is not a bigot in the slightest. He has no issue with trans people. He has no issue with gay people. Does he want the government telling him what pronouns to use? No, and that is fair. The government shouldn't be allowed to tell you what words to use. Okay. His answer was so beautiful. It was a full defense of free speech. He said, you're using your free speech to potentially offend me right now, and that's great. And then when he put it, the real beauty of it is when he put it back on her, because her argument, whatever her argument was, or I don't know anything about her, she didn't strike me as particularly bright, but because her argument wasn't clear in what she was saying, or she knew it was just a faulty premise to start with, she just crumbled. I mean, she literally could not get a sentence out. So as someone that interviews people and someone that's on camera, I have a little bit of a cringe factor with that because, one day someone could slam me. The moment that so many people reference on my show, the first time I had Larry Elder on, and we were talking about systemic racism, and he just beat me relentlessly with facts. It was, I've told this before, but when we were at Aura TV at the time, and I had a big crew there, and I went into the control room, and a bunch of people said to me, Dave, we got to cut that from the show. You want to cut that, right? And I said, no, that's a learning moment. And the truth is that in some ways it's my worst moment on camera, and in some ways it's my best. Because it's my worst because I went into a gunfight not prepared, right? I wouldn't have a gun that was ready to go. And I got shot, and he beat me. So that's bad. But on the other way, it was my best because I let it be. We posted it fully with no editing, and we let it be. And from that, subsequently, I learned, my audience learned, I've become good friends with Larry. We've had follow-up conversations about it. So in terms of what happened with Jordan and this lady, it's everything that I know and that you know that Jordan is and can do. And if you take the simple position, the very, very simple position that you don't have to do a lot of intellectual work on, the simple position of freedom of speech.
Right.
There's really no counter to that.
Right.
There's no counter to that. He was willing to defend someone else's right to speak, and he wanted that privilege to be put on him, although I don't really like the word privilege. So it's just a sad, pathetic state of the way the media is. And just look in the last couple of days, the amount of garbage articles that have been written about him, that he's a member of the alt-right and he's offensive. And I think Canada Metro just wrote this thing on how Jordan Peterson's lectures are leading to hate of gay people. No, they're not. This is absolute dribble and lies. And it's why I have such an issue with the mainstream media, which I'm happy to talk about as well.
Speaking of the Larry Elder interview in question, I think your response speaks to two fundamental qualities which you clearly possess. And actually, that would be a good segue to something that I was going to ask later on, but it seems appropriate to ask it now. Number one, you exhibited epistemic humility, right? That humility in terms of what you know and what you don't know. When I know something and I know it well, I come in with all of the necessary swagger to defend that position because I'm absolutely certain about my position. On the other hand, when I'm asked by many different people in many different forms, all sorts of questions. In my class, for example, a student might ask me something, and when I don't know, I'll say, wow, you know what? You got me stumped on that question. Let me look into it and I'll get back to you. And usually they're taken aback by this because they're amazed that someone, the professor who should be all-knowing is saying, you know what, I actually don't know the answer to that. So I think, number one, that's epistemic humility, which is a rare quality. So kudos on that. And I think number two, I think it's also just honesty, right? It's basically being able to have enough introspection to say, there are things that I know, there are things that I don't know, there are times I do things wrong, times I do things greatly, and act accordingly. So I guess that leads me to a segue, which I was going to, as I said, ask later. If you were to list your top, and I think you might have asked it on one of your shows recently, and I think maybe even to Jordan, what are some of your greatest qualities, but what are some of your greatest faults? What might they be? And then I'm happy, if you're interested in hearing my response for me, I'm happy to try to answer for myself.
Of course. Well, it's always a little, not silly. There's always something about talking about yourself in this regard. But I would say, yes, I think something related to humility. I never feel, it's just not in me. I don't feel the need to be right all the time. I actually, not only do I like being wrong and learning, but I really do cherish those moments. Just in the last couple of weeks, when I had Shapiro in here and we were talking about abortion, and I know that my position on abortion, where basically I'm pro-choice till about 20 weeks because there's some scientific evidence that the fetus can feel pain at that point, that at that point I would say that you can't have an abortion, but I don't like the idea of the state telling a woman what to do. But that's my basic position, and I know that it's not purely epistemologically consistent, because if I'm saying it's a life at 19 weeks, it's a life. If I'm saying if it's a life at 20, it's obviously a life at 19. And Ben takes another position, the pro-life position. But I love that place where you can sit across from somebody and say, we disagree on this, but we respect each other as humans. So I think a little humility is just built into me. I think that sort of goes with just kind of decency and curiosity. I guess I am curious. I don't feel that I have all the answers. And I don't even know that I would ever want to feel that I had all the answers. You have all these people, and especially the blue check Twitterati these days. They know everything about everything. Every CNN anchor who got everything wrong before the election, they know everything now. Everyone, and it's nauseating and it's not true. And it's actually why people come to people like us. Right. A little humility for you as a professor to say that to your class, it shows that you're a human. Right. Nobody knows everything. So the people who come to you with all the answers, they're the biggest liars, actually. Right. And I'm a lot of things, and I have a lot of flaws, but I'm not a liar. I don't lie to my audience, and I think that that's partly because I don't feel the need to teach them. What I want my audience to do, hopefully, is be on the same adventure that I'm on, which is I'm really trying to figure out, especially in a time like we're in right now, where everything is upside down and Trump has tossed the chessboard up, or whatever analogy you want to use. He drove the truck through the store, or whatever that is, blew up the whole place. Well, now there's fertile ground for good ideas too. fertile ground for bad ideas, but perhaps some of this good stuff can happen. But the only way it can happen is with a respect for free speech and an ability to sit with people that you disagree with. So I would say some humility, a little decency, some curiosity. I think those are and then actually I think one other thing is I have sort of a relentless belief that I can do this, whatever this is, whatever it is that I'm doing. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's a little bit of what I referenced earlier about Clyde, but I have a relentless belief that I want to make a mark here and that I can. And I've seen evidence by the way the show has grown, and that when I go to the supermarket now, I'm always recognized. Yeah. You know, I go to Petco or wherever. You know, sometimes I don't want to be recognized. It's nice to be recognized. It's nice that people appreciate what you do. Every now and again, I got my low hat on and my sunglasses and an old T-shirt and ripped shorts, and somebody says hi, and okay, it's actually what a great set of problems, obviously. But I have a relentless belief that I can do this and that I can affect some change, and that's what I would want my audience to do. Don't listen to me. Figure out what you believe in. Hopefully I've given you a broad spectrum of ideas that you can choose from and find what you believe in. But even if you believe in the reverse things that I believe in, even if you believe in postmodernism and leftism and collectivism, well, then fight for them. But fight for them honestly. Fight for them not by silencing me. Fight for them by fighting for your ideas openly and honestly. And then we can have that debate. But if your argument is to silence me or to use violence against me, then we have a problem. So I guess that somewhat answers your question.
Well, you didn't give me any flaws, which I'd like
flaws, sorry.
Hold on, before you do that, I just wanted to touch upon the sort of being increasingly recognized. I mean, this is something that I've had to face also quite a bit. And, very much like you, while I'm very, very humble and very happy the fact that, people are recognizing you, not for egotistical reasons, but because that means that people are recognizing you for the work that you're doing, and I've also at times found it quite overwhelming in that. I mean, I don't know what the reason is. Maybe it's because of some security issues in my case. Maybe it's because I have young children. It's really a two-edged sword in that. Yes, it's wonderful, but it's also. I mean, I don't want to use such a big word as anxiety-inducing, but I have been surprised by how I've often, I'm being honest here because I could easily just kind of be macho, but at times I found it overwhelming when I'm being recognized so often because, look, I've never had someone come up to me who wasn't perfectly nice. So it's not as though I've had negative experiences, but I'm always thinking sort of the law of the stats. What happens when the guy who doesn't like me comes up? And that's caused a bit of strain. Do you feel a similar thing in your situation?
I do, and it's look, it's sort of uncomfortable talking about this, but I'm glad we're going here because this is where you can get some richness in conversation. Look, the apartment that I lived in before my house now, I was in a tiny little apartment that was a very old building, probably was built in the 1940s. The window to my bedroom literally didn't lock. Anyone could have just.
Is this the place I've been to in near?
The old place.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah, so you saw that place. Yeah. It was a little bungalow. It was perfectly fine, but anyone could have just come. I mean, there was nothing. There was no security there at all.
But you have a strong guard dog.
I've got a 13-year-old Hurricane Katrina rescue who's her bark isn't as bad as her bite. But at that place, I did have a little. I mean, the truth is, I don't even know that I've ever said this publicly, but I did have some anxiety at times because, especially at that time when I was talking about Islam a little bit more and just all of this stuff, and then when I started seeing the hate online really rise, and I was getting true hate letters, some that seemed to be somewhat legit, one that we had to actually take some action on. I did have some level of anxiety related to that. Now. I'm in a house and we have a fence outside, and you've been here. There's cameras outside and all that, and it's sort of gross. I know the word gross has an odd connotation in our circles, but it's kind of gross talking about it. I believe that 99% of people on Earth are good and basically want the same things as you and I want. They want some comfort, they want some ability to hopefully have a home and have a family, and they want to eat some food and occasionally have sex and play some video games or soccer or basketball or whatever. I think most people truly are like that.
When you're married, it's very occasionally.
Yeah, right. Well, but I genuinely believe that people are basically good. But yes, of course, the people that come up to me now usually like me, and that's why they're coming up. But yes, will one day someone come to a public event that I'm doing or something or see me on the street and really hate me? of course, and that's not a fun thing to think about or anything else. But it's also why we have to defend good ideas, because you are allowed, and I will defend your right to hate me, but I won't defend your right to stalk me or, come on my property or physically assault me. So look, all of this, you're right. It's like, it sounds like an odd ego thing if we're talking about this, but it's just a function of, if you're going to do anything in life, I don't think Albert Einstein was working on the theory of relativity so that he could become a celebrity.
Exactly.
But you know what? Albert Einstein, when he was riding his little bike down the street with his crazy hair, people going, oh, that's Albert Einstein, So it's all a piece of it, and you manage it however you can. But yes, all of us have different stresses and different ways that we deal with this stuff. And sometimes frankly, sometimes I'm very stressed about it, and sometimes I'm not. And it just kind of ebbs and flows, and I do my best to control it.
Got it. All right, let's give me one or two flaws.
Okay.
Yeah.
So flaws, I think a flaw would be, I certainly as an interviewer don't think that I'm perfect. Sometimes people will say, well, he doesn't ask the hardest questions or something like that. They'll say he's throwing softball questions. Now, I actually don't inherently believe that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get the most information out of my guest. But are there moments that I could smack someone down a little bit more? Possibly. And that's just a different style. Larry King, who's a friend of mine and a mentor, that was the same criticism he used to get all the time. And I thought he was the greatest interviewer of all time. And the fact that he's even taken any interest in what I do is incredible. So actually, I'm not really giving you a flaw, because I think it's a criticism that's not fully a flaw.
Like a dispositional flaw. You're too dogmatic. You're too whatever. You're too selfish. Whatever. Something that is dispositional about you.
Yeah. Okay. So disposition. I'm too big picture for sure. I'm constantly thinking about the big picture, and I think we talked about this when we had dinner a couple months ago. I genuinely am worried often and world weary that truly the things that we talk about, that Western civilization is crumbling. I am worried about that. Now, the reason I would call this a flaw is you also got to live a life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to live a functional life. And I find often that I'm doing this pie in the sky stuff, and I'm worried about all of this stuff when I have other things that need immediate, that are here and now, and with people that are right in front of me that I got to deal with. And I'm worried about some stuff that is existential, that is huge, and that most likely I can't solve or control. And that's where the default of my brain goes to that stuff, instead of often dealing with some of the immediate stuff, some of the immediate work stuff we have to do. But I should take a moment and especially credit David and Amira in this case, because they enable me. All of my flaws in that regard, and I'm not that organized because I'm dealing with all this other big stuff, so all the details often get crumbled and crushed. They manage that for me, and that's what a good team is. So I'm very proud of the team that we've built here. But I would say a flaw is that, I can waste a lot of time on the imaginary future.
Maybe not imaginary. Some of your worries are probably very well founded. But yeah, I hear you. If I were to answer, I'll just give one answer for myself, just so that it seems a bit more symmetric, that I'm also opening up.
Please.
Yeah, I'm going to answer one thing that is both a quality, but when it becomes too much, becomes a fault. It turns out, and forgive me for getting a bit professorial here, there are many, many phenomena in nature that are best captured via an inverted U shape, meaning too little of it is not good, too much of it is not too good, and there's some sweet spot. For example, if you exercise at too low an intensity, it's not good. Too high an intensity, it's not good. But there's some middle spot of exercise intensity that's ideal. And you find this response curve for many things. Now, when it comes to certain personality traits, you find the exact same inverted U shape. So in my case, I'm someone who's very pure, very conscientious, very detail-oriented. I have to have everything perfect, so that I kind of exist in this purity bubble. So on the one hand, that's a very positive thing, because it ensures that the things that I do really go through a very high standard. But on the other hand, I think it's a flaw, because it also reduces my productivity. If I have to check anything that I write 633 times because, God forbid, there might be a comma that's out of place, well, then that's really losing the big picture. Or you worry a lot about perfectionism. It becomes kind of like an OCD manifestation, right? Where someone is consistently washing their hands for fear of germ contamination, while I'm constantly scanning the world so that my purity bubble remains pure. And I think that's one of the, sorry, if I could just finish, one of the reasons why I think I love my academic career so much, and certainly when I was first in mathematics and computer science, because you could really create a world where there are very specific rules of conduct, of behavior, of debate that are, as pure as you can get. And the reason why I get oftentimes so irate and bellicose towards enemies of truth is because I view them as folks who are polluting my bubble of honesty and truth. So I don't know if that's a quality or not, but that's what I would answer for myself.
Well, I actually love that answer because it shows a couple things. It shows that often our strengths are our weaknesses, which I think most people have those two conflicting things happening within them. But also it's funny because, for as much as I love you, this is something that we have very different in us. I am not detail oriented that way. So for example, when we write my direct messages, so for my 5-minute message of the week, which it's the one thing that I do off prompter. When I originally started the show, I wanted to just do it stream of conscious, but we realized it would just be a little too messy and we wanted to get things really just right. So when I write them, again, I write in sort of broad ways and it's not very detailed. And this is where I think Amira especially, who thinks a little bit more like you in details, and don't say this, don't say that, say it, what it is that you're talking about. She really edits my DMs and tightens them up in a way, that makes them more understandable, more literate actually. And that's because I'm doing the pie in the sky stuff where I may forget that I have to define some of these terms again for the average person. And that's why a beautiful thing is having people around you who can fill in some of your deficiencies. Right. You can always work on your deficiencies, but you want to have a team around you and hopefully a spouse around you or whatever it is that helps balance some of those things, because none of us are perfect. And Lord knows if I was doing this as a one-man thing, I'm not even sure how to log into YouTube. So it would be a big problem.
Right. All right. Leaving the personal stuff for a bit, but we'll probably come back to it a bit later. Another topical, topical issue, which many people suggested that we talk about, is sort of the big hashtag #MeToo. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that maybe it has gone through the inverted U shape, where it's gone now too much into the hysteria zone of the curve? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you're asking me this, because just by the way we booked the show over the last couple of months, we had advance booked a bunch of things, so we haven't done much on this, as so much of it was happening, right before Christmas. So I really haven't talked about this much, so I'm glad you're asking me. Look, the monsters, the true people who have done horrific things, the Harvey Weinsteins and the ones that really sounds like we're doing terrible stuff. Matt Lauer with this door thing and people exposing themselves to women in closed doors and all of that stuff. I would say the true monsters of this, of course, they deserve to go down. And we should not dismiss that, and we have to kind of really sit with that and understand that this is a reality, and this is perhaps something that in this case I can use a little identity politics against us and say that there is something that you and I as men, regardless of whether you're straight or gay or whatever it is, that we may not fully understand just by identity. There's just a piece. It's not all of it, but there's a piece that we may not. I don't know what it's like to live life as a woman. I don't, and you don't either. We could try it, maybe. We'll dress up in drag one day,
unless we immediately self-identify as women, in which case it becomes our truth, and instantaneously we become women.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk to you as if I'm talking to a woman for the rest of this. How about that? Yeah. But so what I would say, look, of course the monsters deserve to go down. The people that had repeated history of doing this sort of stuff, of course. Unfortunately, and this is why people like us have talked about what modern feminism has morphed into for so long, why the collectivist ideas of leftism and postmodernism are so terrible, and the oppression Olympics and all of this stuff. It's now morphing into something else where it's ready to take down everybody. And it's going to take, look, the Aziz Ansari thing this week. Again, I'm not a woman. I wasn't there. So we're doing a little he said, she said. But it doesn't sound that bad in terms of what he actually did. It may have been just a date that didn't really go well. Sometimes guys hit on girls a couple times or make a move a couple times, and sometimes girls or guys actually, are a little timid or shy at first. Sometimes they want to be coaxed a little bit more. I mean, this is all dangerous stuff to talk about, but it's the reality of how humans interact with each other. So of course there's an element now where they've gained a certain amount of cachet. The media really loves this. And can we use this thing now to take out anyone we don't like? That of course is a huge problem, and we have to be very careful about that. But that's actually, to me, not the thing I'm most concerned about. What I'm most concerned about is that we are going to basically, not legally, but de facto or de jure in a certain way, in both cases, we're going to sort of criminalize the way we behave with each other sexually. And that guys in college, everyone that ever went to college got drunk one night and hooked up. Well, now if you're a guy and you're drunk and you hook up with this girl and it's completely consensual, and who knows what you did, what drug you did or whatever you did, but it's completely consensual, but the girl wakes up with regret. Well, now she can claim that you raped her. And now this is why one of the best things that Trump did was, DeVos got rid of these Title IX laws. And we did a whole show on this with Laura Kipnis.
Right.
But Title IX, in effect, was removing our system of innocent until proven guilty and was letting colleges deal with criminal problems. This is a massive problem that Trump got rid of, Obama-era laws that were edicts that were put in. So the problem is we're going to get to a place where people will be afraid to hook up. They'll be afraid to interact. Or if you have a colleague, perhaps, that you might put your arm around or just touch her knee or any of these things that are not mean-spirited, that are not done with any sort of sexual untowardness or anything like that. This is all going to start turning us all against each other. And I've seen, now I'll go a little sort of futuristic conspiracy on you. We know that the men's rights movement is growing as a general movement. It's growing as a counter to what has happened as feminism has gone over the top. So we know that the men's rights movement is growing and that there are literally groups of men that are basically just checking out of having a relationship with a woman. They're not gay, but they're just saying, I'm just not even going to do this. Well, guess what's coming? Because it's on Drudge every day. Sex robots are coming. I have no problem with that. I mean, I'm really not kidding here. I have no problem with sex robots. You can do whatever the hell you want to do, buy a sex robot, whatever. But literally, men are going to be replacing women with robots. I mean, this is not. I mean, I hope you can see my logic here. By the way.
I've even looked at one point I was doing an analysis of the waist to hip ratios of female escorts when they advertise themselves online, because I wanted to show that the hourglass figure is a human universal. And as part of that study, I actually found a company that specialized in a broad range of different sex dolls, and the sex dolls were advertised with their waist to hip ratios, and guess what, their waist to hip ratios were exactly the hourglass. So that future is already here. It might not be an automated robot, but it's already here.
Oh, I'm so shocked that you're saying that men that want to have sex with women don't want morbidly obese women or obscenely skinny women.
Or guys or girls who look like Michael Phelps.
Exactly right, exactly. But anyway, so you can just see the way this is all going. If we let the Me Too movement, which again, take out the real bad guys here, but once we let it morph into something else, especially with the painfully dishonest media that we have, that is happy to take out anyone for clicks. Again, look what we just talked about earlier. Look what the media is doing to Jordan Peterson right this very moment.
Right.
They're willing to do this to anyone that they don't like. And unfortunately, by the time they retract it or they realize that they did something wrong or it's all conjecture or it's he said, she said, usually the damage is done. So I have reservations that I think everyone else has. I think Christina Hoff Sommers, our friend, is probably doing the best work on this and trying to acknowledge reality and also say, let's not let this thing get out of control.
So let me sort of answer my own question from an evolutionary psychology perspective. And before I do that, I hate the fact that I have to preface it by saying that, of course, sexual harassment, systematic sexual harassment, sexual assault, taking advantage of your power position to try to intimidate someone, to provide you sexual favors, all of that stuff is, of course, off limits. That goes without saying. But on the other hand, we also know that both men and women have evolved very specific preferences, not only in terms of the type of men and women that they desire in terms of their morphological features, but also in the types of behavioral features or signatures that they prefer, right? So, for example, very few women will come to you and say, you know what really gets my sexual juices flowing is if I can have a very tentative beta male who's afraid of his shadow, who sucks his thumb, who listens and cries at Taylor Swift while eating ice cream. That's really what I'm looking for. Most women will tell you, I want a guy who is aggressive. Aggressive doesn't mean he rapes you, but he's got a socially dominant disposition. A guy who will chase me. A guy who doesn't intimidate me into sex, but who certainly knows how to court me in the way that most women wish to be courted. Now, how does that manifest itself? It only does so in 13 trillion different ways. And let me just mention a few. If you study...
I want all 13 trillion.
Okay, here we go. If you want to look at universal mating preferences that women exhibit towards men, then look for a product that women overwhelmingly consume only as women. In other words, men rarely consume it. Well, romance novels, right? So you could look at the content of romance novels where the content is precisely targeting female fantasies, female sexuality. Well, the storyline, whether it's an Egyptian romance novel or a Bolivian one or a Japanese one, the guy is exactly the same guy. As you maybe have heard me mention this before in various venues. He is bold, he is a risk taker, he is aggressive, he fights alligators on a six-pack and bites off the head of the alligator. He cannot be tamed except for the love of this one good woman. So the archetype of the guy that women are looking for is not the tentative guy who gives you, the consent form. I am now going to play Barry White music. Are you okay with that? I am about to let loose my flowing hair, the Fabio hair. Are you fine with that? Please sign here, right? So there is an element of human courtship that is completely attacked once you start becoming so afraid to even court a woman. Now, by the way, in a free society, we have to tolerate Holocaust deniers, right? As a free speech absolutist, I'm the guy who says I'm Jewish and I tolerate the greatest affront that could be possible, which is somebody denying the Holocaust. By the same token, in a free society, you have to tolerate assholes, right? So a guy who is too drunk and approaches you 3 times and is saying nasty things for you at the bar, maybe he's a very bad guy, but he didn't engage in assaultative verbal rape, right? So this is where we've now gone over the edge, where I basically get, by the way, both men and women who speak to me privately. Men will say they're afraid to approach women because then it'll be construed as, right? And women say, where are the suave, aggressive guys, right? As a matter of fact, one final thing, and I'll cede the floor to you in terms of what I just said. There's a show that I caught, and I'm maybe ashamed to admit that I even know that the show exists, but it has served its purpose because I can now talk about it from a research perspective. There's a show that just started a few weeks ago where it's like a reality-based show where a bunch of black women from the United States who can no longer find love in the U.S. because they think that most of the men are useless and wimpy, go to Italy to then look for men. And what do you think that they find very attractive in those men? That they pursue them, that they are not catcalling them, but they are, right, Italian men. There's a stereotype. So how come these women seem to be exhibiting all the things that would now get you in jail because you complimented a woman? So I think we've gone too far in my perspective.
Yeah, well, I love that you're giving that some scientific basis. And, the real issue here is that this is what we and this collective group of people that are sort of in it with us have been talking about for so long. The left, unfortunately, the modern left, and it is virtually all of it, it is always led by its worst because they view victimhood as virtue. So the worse you are a victim, whether it's reality or not, whether it's real oppression or perceived oppression, the more they will always drag you more. So the problem is that look, if a guy rapes a girl, if a guy physically assaults a girl, of course, again, it's, as you said, it's so stupid that we have to keep qualifying all of our statements with that. But of course, that's a problem and a criminal issue. But in these other instances where there's either a drunk hookup or a guy at a bar that's drunk and says something to a girl, whatever it is, a bad, pickup line or whatever, and that this is not verbal rape, obviously, or any of this nonsense. The problem is that the left is inherently addicted to its own pain.
Right.
So it will always have to defend the most idiotic things possible. And that's why it will eat itself. I mean, this is why we all talk about the snake that eats its own tail. It's why the Women's March will not let Bernie speak. It's why Black Lives Matter will stop a gay pride parade and say you have to sign our edict. And there's a zillion other examples of this. And that's what the problem here is that for all the legitimacy of Me Too, is that knowing the way the left takes a legitimate issue, but then extrapolates it into everything to just create more control and more power and scare more people into silence. That is the danger here. And I think that that's what we're going to be up against increasingly over the next couple of years.